Hey everybody, today I'm talking about A Game of Thrones Betwixt, which is a 3 to 6 player bidding card game by Fantasy Flight Games. This one takes 60 to 90 minutes to play. So the game is going to look somewhat like this when you set it up. We have a bunch of different decks of cards here. You've got the influence decks, which is going to be your actions and the things you're going to bid with throughout the game. You're going to have this ally deck here, which are the characters that you're trying to gain influence over and add them to your council to get victory points. And you're also going to have a bunch of characters that you yourself are going to represent from the A Song of Ice and Fire series, such as the Lannisters, you got the Tyrells there, you got Doran Martell and Daenerys Targaryen, as well as other characters that I haven't used in this particular setup. There's Euron Greyjoy, Eddard Stark, Tyrion Lannister, Melisandre, and Jon Snow. Now, the game is going to take a number of turns depending on the player count here. So, according to the sheet, let's say we're playing a 3-player game. We're going to have 3 seasons. And each season is going to consist of 4 rounds. But of course, here you see if I've got 6 players, we're only going to play 2 seasons, but each of those seasons is going to consist of 6 rounds. And that's going to change the kind of income of the cards you have in your hand, because you are not going to refresh your hand until the season is over. So you have to manage how you're going to use these cards quite carefully. Now, 9 of your cards are going to be from the communal influence deck here, but one of those cards is going to be character specific. So you can see here this no middle ground card is specific to Cersei Lannister, who I'm playing as, and they are usually particularly powerful cards and have some kind of thematic tie to that character. I suppose we should talk about the aim of the game here. So we're going to be, as I said earlier, aiming towards get control of these characters that are going to come up randomly from this ally deck. And this number here is going to be how much influence they're going to be worth in your council. And this part down here is going to be some kind of specific rule that's going to be active during that round. Or some cards might have an effect that will take place once you win that card. But before we talk about how the gameplay works, we need to work out how the scoring works. So the scoring in this game is quite unique, or at least borrowed from a unique game called Between Two Cities, where you're always working with a neighbour and you don't have a personal individual score. So, for example, Cersei is always working with Olenna and always working with Daenerys. And between them, they're going to have a council of cards which they're going to win. And at the end of the game, only your lowest council of your 2 is going to be your final score. So again, Cersei is going to work with Daenerys, Daenerys is going to work with Cersei and Dorian. Dorian is going to work with Olenna and Daenerys, and Olenna is going to work with Dorian and Cersei. So each round is going to consist of flipping a new character over, and then the first player is going to have 1 or 2 options, or every player's got 1 of 2 options each of their turns. Now the first thing you can do is to kneel, which is basically to pass and say, look, you're not going to play any more cards, or not play any cards at all if you didn't want to. But the other one is to play a card from your hand. And there's a lot of things you have to consider when playing these cards, because not only do these cards have a value in the top left-hand corner here, which will of course be your bid essentially of claiming that character, and the other one is going to be the actual ability of the card itself. So let's have a look at some of the cards here. So you've got this Counting Coppers here, which is worth 6, which is not too bad, but this one means that after a leader wins the bid, you may draw a card from the influence deck. So this one gives you a good option of replenishing your hand. You've got the Royal Decree here, which means that once this one's played, there's no way that any other player can tamper with it, which is a big part of this game. There's quite a lot of take that and quite a lot of kind of shafting people and being a bit nasty. There's a contingency plan here, which means that if you didn't win when playing this card down, you get the card back into your hand. You've got the Pulling the Strings one here, which is not worth a tremendous amount of influence, but it does mean that if you played the most amount of Pulling the Strings cards and somebody else, or one of your neighbours, wins that card, it means they have to play it between you and that particular player. So this one gives you a bit of control even if you don't win. You've got the Corruption here, which simply moves a power token from any leader's council to their other council, which we'll talk about in a second. You've got this big Game of Thrones card here, which is worth a massive 11, but it has no special ability on it. And you've got little ones here, that's these little birds, which means that you can add 1 power token from the supply to the current ally, which is the center card. So if you're confident that you're going to win a card, then you can add these power tokens on them, and these power tokens are going to be worth a number of points ranging from 1 to 3 at the end of the game. So I've advanced the game a few turns here, and let's just say that Cersei's just played her 3rd card, completing a total value of 15, and let's just say the next players aren't interested in raising their bids any further, therefore they're going to kneel and therefore discard any cards that they bid with unless they had that contingency plan card, which means they'll actually take it back into their hand. So no one else is interested in bidding any further. Therefore, they've all knelt and are out of the round. So then Cersei, as the winner, is going to take the card that's been bid for and place it in one of her councils. Let's just say she places it in this one here. And they're also going to draw an additional tile here randomly from the bonus tokens, which again will not be revealed until the end of the game. And once a character's been claimed, you're going to go into the next round by moving this marker down here, passing the first player token, refreshing your character so that you're still in the bid, and then drawing the next ally from the deck, which might be something like this, where the Shae character here will give you 3 influence points. But when you claim her, by winning that bid, you're going to move an ally to Shae's council from your other council to give you more manipulation to keep your councils balanced as possible. So the end of the game is going to look a bit more like this, where a bunch of these allies have been claimed and placed in councils. Again, you're going to calculate your lowest of your 2 councils, and whoever's lowest is the highest out of all the councils is going to be declared the winner. If it's a tie, then you'll go to your other council to see who's got the highest in that way. So in this example, Cersei Lannister is the highest character because her worst council is stronger than everybody else's worst council. So you can tell from the demo there that this game is very simple. You just keep either putting a card down and using its ability, or kneeling and going out of the round. But where all the kind of fun and all the flavour lies is in the ally deck. Some of these allies are absolutely fascinating, and in of course, the influence deck itself, because not only the bidding value important, but the actual ability of those cards is very important as well. So let's take a look at some more of these ally abilities and see how these are going to change each round. Like this one here, for example, Theon Greyjoy, each time a leader plays a red card, they can resolve its ability again. So you've got a double strength red cards that round. And that's going to affect all the players. So it's like everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet, which makes every single ally feel massively different when it's the active character. Or even ones like we've got Samwell Tarly up here. When after the first red, green, or purple card is played that round, then that's the only colour of that type that can be played. So you've got a real kind of race to get these cards down and be the first person to play them, because everyone else is going to get locked out of doing so. Or you've got like Viserys Targaryen here, where you can move up to 2 player tokens from any council to his council, and then move another ally from Viserys's council to your other council. So you've got lots of mitigation tools which you might really need, and even trump the ability of the influence value itself. There might be a really strong character, but you're more interested in the ability that it can do. Some more here, like you've got Barristan Selmy, where you can choose a leader, and during the next round, that leader must kneel as their first turn. So you've got a lot of control if you've got a threat on the board or on the table that you want to not compete with you this round. You've got ones like Shae, which I mentioned earlier. You can move a character to your other council. Or this one here, like Mance Rayder, you can actually place Mance in another council and just give them negative points. So again, you're always not only worrying about your own council, but worrying about other characters as well. So yeah, there's tons of different characters here. You've got a massive deck, and each time you play the game, a different formation is going to come out, and you're going to see new characters. The decision space in this game is a strange one, because you do have a really solid amount of hand management here, but the game is quite chaotic and there's a lot of unpredictability, which you'd probably expect from a Game of Thrones game. But it's all about kind of knowing when you're going to go all in on a character. Are you going to get that big chunk of points by getting a particularly strong character, or are you going to kind of go all in on the ability of a character? But that means, of course, that you're going to massively diminish the strength of your hand for the remainder of the season, because you only have this many cards to work with, or perhaps you want to use the cards to make sure you've got a steady income of influence cards going forward. There are different tools you can use, such as the contingency plans, which means that even if you don't win, you can get them back into your hand. But sometimes you'll use them just to kind of rake up the bidding for the other players to make them get rid of more cards. But if you end up winning it, then that's even more cards you're going to lose from your hand. And it's also a good, interesting balancing act of keeping both your councils as strong as you can, because you could have the strongest council in the world. It doesn't matter if your other council is weak and all the other players are kind of doing the same thing. So sometimes you can kind of sit back and let your not teammate, but semi-teammate boost the council for you, and you can focus on the other one. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this game is amazingly balanced. It really is not. You really do have to be on your toes and prepare for anything to happen. And that is kind of leads into the decisions as well, because sometimes like this, it might be the last round of the season, and all of a sudden I force all the other players to kneel and I win, and then nobody else has any real control that they can do about that. And normally that kind of thing would really rub me the wrong way, but because you know what you're getting into when you play this game, it really does kind of add to that tension of how you're going to manage your hands. I think the time investment for this game is pretty much spot on, really. The box does say 90 minutes, so I do think that's probably only when you're playing with that full complement of 6 players. If you're playing at 3 players, it's probably only going to take around 45 minutes to play, which feels just about right for me. I would say that the game does scale well as well. 3 to 6 players is not the easiest player count because a lot of people do want to play games with 2, but of course you need that 3rd player for that council mechanism. And I think a lot of people would say this game does really shine at least 4 players really, but I don't have a problem playing it with 3. It does make it feel faster, and I've had pretty much just as much fun playing with that player count. But if you're looking for a game that scales well and something that isn't such a party game, you want to play 6 players and you want to play something a bit more meaty and a bit more cutthroat, then this is a good option for that in a good amount of time. Additionally, you are invested in the game when it's not actually your turn, because even if you folded or knelt and other people are still bidding, then you might even benefit from that because the players to your left or right might win that card and add it to your council. So you are still trying to almost support your neighbours even when you're not playing yourself. I also think that the replayability of this game is rock solid because there are so many different cards in the game. Just a bunch of characters. We talk about a bunch of them, but there's absolutely stacks of them, and they all are completely unique and work very differently and feel drastically differently as well. Additionally, you can of course play with the different characters yourself, all of which come with their own little deck of cards you can add in, which again are very thematic, add a lot of different abilities which almost feel so strong, but because everybody's deck is as strong as the next, then it doesn't really feel like imbalanced or anything like that. Additionally, you can add in these blue cards as well, which you can add at the end of I think it's the 2nd and the 3rd season, which are really powerful benefits to ramp up the tension and to add more powerful cards into the fold. As with a lot of bidding style games, the interaction in this one is pretty ferocious, and probably even more so than a lot of other bidding games out there. Because your hand is so tight, and you and another player or even several players get into a bidding war, then that is going to have not only a direct impact on each other, because you're going to be probably gunning for each other, trying to nullify your hands, horrible take that cards getting involved, but also you've got to be considered that all the other players are probably going to benefit from that because they're not the ones diminishing their hands, and they're going to be in a stronger position to bid for future characters. So everything you do in this game has some level of interaction, because not only are you worrying about your councils and how they balance out, working with your neighbours that way, but also the card play and how you're going to manage your personal hand of cards throughout the season. The production for this game is really good. All the cards are linen finished, which is great. Nice to handle, nice to shuffle, and they're going to stand up to repeated plays. Additionally, the actual symbology and the layout of these cards is nice and clean. You can see what all the different suits are quite clearly, and I'm colourblind and I have no issue at all. And also the actual verbiage of how the cards are worded is nicely done, because I played this game with people who normally don't like words on cards, and they had no problem understanding all the kind of text and how it was written. So that's a good touch. Additionally, the artwork on the character cards and even the influence cards themselves is absolutely stellar. I'm pretty sure this is all recycled artwork from the Living card game, which understandably so. Why wouldn't you use it again if you have that in your library? But yeah, it has that proper A Song of Ice and Fire feel to it. All the characters look as they should, and even then some. So yeah, I'm very happy with the production of this game. You've got cards galore, and all the characters look fantastic. Okay, so let's get into some final thoughts on A Game of Thrones Betwixt. So despite this game having so many ingredients that normally I'd run a mile from, very swingy cards, take that cards that you can do nothing about, things you had no idea was coming up and you couldn't plan for, I always found myself finding this game fun from start to finish. Always engaged, always excited about what was going to come out next, and I just love the anticipation and the excitement about what these characters do, because each one does feel so different from the last, and not only do you have to worry about the points and managing your councils, but also how much that ability is going to affect you for better or for worse. I love the bidding wars that you can get into with the other players, because you do have such a tight amount of cards in your hand, and you do have to kind of spread these accordingly depending on which part of the game you're in. If you are in the first round and a strong card comes out, think, am I willing to basically lay all my cards on the table here and leave myself without anything for the next ones, which could be even better characters. Now, I did stop and think, is it my love for the IP? I'm a big George R. R. Martin fan. Is there rose-tinted glasses? But I have played this game with people who knew nothing about the series, books or TV series, and they found it equally as enjoyable. And even people who normally share the same concerns I do about take that cards and the swinginess, they enjoyed it as well. So there must be something they've got right here, because I think you know what you're getting into when you're playing a game like this. All those things that might affect you quite negatively are just kind of easier to swallow, and they don't leave you feeling disgruntled or anything, which is quite a weird thing to achieve. This is definitely the best implementation of this between two cities mechanism that I've seen, and because there is so much manipulation you can gain throughout the game, moving council to council, moving these power tokens around, there's just a lot you can do to tinker with your councils to try and keep them balanced and mess with the other players. Additionally, for a game to scale like this up to 6 players really well is quite unusual. If you have a regular 6-player group, you probably find yourself quite often leaning towards party games. This one is not a party game, and it has a lot of things going on here, a lot of things to mull over, some good juicy decisions. So I know these IP-based games are generally tarred with the same brush of being rushed out money grabs, but this is not what this game is. There's a lot of fun to be had here. There's some good gameplay, some really cool card interactions, and some just longevity in the game and excitement that a lot of games don't tend to deliver. So I really enjoyed this one. I think it's a solid design, and one that I'm enjoying quite a lot. Yes, it's not going to be for everybody, particularly if you're not a fan of Game of Thrones. And some of the mechanisms are going to be quite jarring. It's quite confrontational. There's some take that cards in there. There's some things that you can do nothing about at times. But if you embrace that chaos, you can get quite a lot of fun out of this one. So that is my thoughts on A Game of Thrones Betwixt. Don't overlook it. It's a fun design.